and this is another video in my series on JavaScript and Node.js for complete beginners. So in this video we're going to take a look at the if statement. If you've done any programming before, this will be probably too simple for you, and if you are a complete beginner, this is for you. So if you have done some programming before, you probably want to skip ahead in this course a little bit, maybe to the bit where we start discussing objects and classes. Well, I'll see how the course goes. I haven't created those videos yet at this point in time, but by the time you watch this I may have. Okay, so I've created a file here called conditions.js, and I'm going to just write use strict here, semicolon. You may have noticed, if you've been following this course, that often in JavaScript it will work just fine without the semicolons, but I feel it's good practice to put them in. Occasionally they are absolutely needed, and other times JavaScript will just kind of automatically kind of put them in behind the scenes, so it will just infer that you meant a semicolon. Semicolons are used to end statements basically. It's the kind of programming equivalent of a full stop or a period, as you say in the USA. But because JavaScript was used for such a long time in browsers, it's kind of got this free and easy thing whereby it will try to correct your mistakes to a certain extent. Okay, so let's get a command line argument, and we'll say that that's going to be a temperature. So let's write let temperature. So I'm declaring a variable, and I'm going to assign it the value of process.argv2, which, if you've been following this course, you might remember is how we get the first thing that someone types after the name of the program when they run it. So in other words, it's the first command line argument. And then now, well, let's actually just echo that back just to see it. So let's print it. So if I run node conditions.js, it says undefined, but what I can do is, after the name of the script, I can write, for example, 21, and then it's going to echo that back to me now. Console.log is printing what I just typed. So supposing we've got some sort of heating system, and we want to take some kind of action if the temperature is, let's say, below 20. So we imagine that what I'm typing here is a temperature in Celsius, and if it's 20, if it's below 20, it's too cold and I want to turn the heating on. I can do that with an if statement. An if statement looks like this. So I'm going to write the keyword if, then I'm going to have two round brackets, and I'm going to have two curly brackets. And notice I've put the opening curly bracket on the same line as the if and the round brackets. And then the closing curly bracket goes on a line further down, and it's kind of aligned with the if. They sort of line up. I'm following the most common coding convention in JavaScript here. There are others, like some people put this bracket down here, but that's less common, I believe, at the moment now in JavaScript. So I'm going to follow the most common formatting for this, and it is important to follow a convention for your code formatting. It's very important. Now, in these round brackets, I can put a condition. So, for example, temperature less than 20. And I can put code in these curly brackets, which will only be executed if this condition is true. So let's just output some text there with console.log. And I'm going to print activating heating. So if I run this now, if I put 21 there on the command line, it's not going to do anything. If I put 20, it's still not going to do anything, because I've said do this only if temperature is less than 20. So 20 is not less than 20, it's equal to 20. Let's run it with, for example, 19.5, and now it says activating heating. So this is an if statement. Hopefully it's fairly clear what it does. It will run the code in curly brackets only if this condition in the round brackets after the if keyword, only if that's true. We could put another one in there. Let's just copy that and put another one in. And we can say if temperature is greater than 21, let's say deactivating heating. So now, if I run this with, let's say, something less than 20, it's going to say activating heating. For 20, it does nothing. 21, it does nothing. But if I type in some value above 21, like 21.2, it says deactivating heating. So now it's too hot, switching the heating off. So these are just a couple of very simple if statements. And if you haven't seen these before, it's really important to practice them. In the next video, we'll look at more complicated versions of these if statements. And we'll leave it there for this video. Do try that out if you're a beginner especially. And until next time, happy coding. In this video, we're going to take a look at if-else in JavaScript. So I'm continuing here my series of videos for complete beginners on JavaScript and Node.js. And in the last video, we looked at if statements. We looked at this. So I would suggest typing this out and getting it working before you tackle this video. And we saw that with an if statement, it will execute code conditionally. So this if statement will only run what's in these curly brackets if this condition is true. And the same for this one, of course. So what we've done here is created something which will say activating heating if the temperature supplied on the command line is less than 20, and it will say deactivating heating if the temperature is greater than 21, otherwise it will do nothing at all. Now we can combine these into a single statement because the fact is that it's not very efficient to have two separate checks like this on temperature. Because if the temperature is less than 20, then if this is true, there's no need to then check if it's over 21. If it's less than 20, it can't be over 21, and yet here we are, we're checking it again. So we do this check and we find it's less than 20, so we run this when we say activating heating. And then we're checking it again. Is it over 21? But it can't be. So we can combine this into a more efficient statement. Before the second if, we write else. So we have else if, and we move this up to get rid of the blank space here. And now we've got a single if-else if statement. And the way this works is if-else if is going to execute one of its alternatives and only one. But it doesn't bother doing unnecessary checking. So now, if we find that the temperature is less than 20, it won't bother checking this because there is no point. If-else if will only execute one of these two alternatives, if either of them at all, and it's a question of which one. So this works kind of like the program that we had before, except it's very slightly more efficient. If I type something above 21, it says deactivating heating. And if I type something below 20, it says activating heating. And if I type something in the middle, like 20.5, it just doesn't do anything at all. It just finishes. All right, now we can make this even a bit more complicated because I could write on the end else. Let's put it in the right place though, else. And this is something that will be executed if none of the alternatives above were executed. So let's write console.log, temperature is normal. So if none of the conditions above it are executed in a sort of compound if-else if statement like this, else will be executed. That means that in this statement, we're always going to execute one of these three alternatives. The question is only which one. So, JavaScript's going to start reading this from the top down. So the first one that it finds that matches, it's going to execute that one and only that one. And if it goes all the way down and gets to the else and finds that none of the above conditions have been executed, then it will execute the else. So now the difference is if I type in 20.5, which doesn't trigger either of these two conditions, then it says temperature is normal. If I were to put 19, let's say, activating heating, and 30 would be deactivating heating. You can have multiple else if clauses in here. So I could put another else if in here, and I could say if temperature is greater than 30, let's say room is overheating, danger. Let's maybe put 35, that's really quite hot, at least where I come from. And it works as you'd expect. So if I put 30 in there, that triggers only deactivating heating. If I put like 40 in there, that's going to say, yeah, well, now we've got a problem, because if I put 40 in there, then this is going to get executed first. So JavaScript will read this down from the top, and it comes to here and it says, okay, you put 40 in, so this condition is true, the temperature is greater than 21, and it runs this, and then it won't run any of the others, because with this if-else-if statement, you're only going to be running one of these clauses, only one of them. So in this case, I can never actually execute this. But supposing I move that up, so I'm going to hold down the Option key and use the arrow to move it up. I've got to pay attention to formatting here. Now I can run any of these different clauses. So now if I run the program with a temperature of 40, it's going to say room is overheating, danger. If I run it with a temperature of, let's say, 30, it just says deactivating heating. So hopefully you can see why that works and why it didn't work when I put 35 down where 21 is, because it's going to read from the top. It's going to say, is this true? You have to remember it's only going to do one of these things. Is this true? And if not, it will take a look at this. Is this true? And if not, it will do this. As soon as it finds one that's true, it will execute it. And if none of them are true, it's going to execute this. So if we were to put in here, like, what's the normal temperature now according to this? 20.5. That says temperature is normal. Okay, so if you're a beginner, definitely try this out. This works the same in a whole bunch of programming languages. This is the same in Java, C, C++, a whole bunch of others that I can't even really remember. But it's a really common sort of construction. And yeah, so try it out for yourself and experiment with it a little bit. And then we're going to move on soon to looking at loops. And in this bit of the course, we're just really looking at the absolute most important nuts and bolts of programming, which are, by the way, generally either the same or extremely similar in a whole variety of different programming languages. There are some languages that they do have this if-else-if type of idea, but they just have slight spelling variations in there. Like in Perl, if I remember rightly, Perl Practical Extraction and Report Language, you would write elif there instead of else if. So you get minor variations like that. But generally, even programming languages that don't use the exact same spelling for all the keywords, they have a lot of these constructions in common. And you will usually find in a programming language some way of doing this if else type of construction. All right, so until next time, happy coding.